The Italian Alps, 14th April 1945. The war in Europe was nearing its end, but the conflict still raged on in these majestic mountains. The early morning light cast long shadows over the rugged terrain, a stark contrast to the peaceful villages nestled in the valleys below. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and the promise of a new day. Dawn, a canvas of pink and orange, bled across the towering peaks, painting the sky with hues of hope and despair. The first rays of sunlight kissed the snow-capped summits, turning them into glittering beacons of light. It was a sight to behold, a moment of tranquility in a world torn apart by war. Their snow-capped summits glistening like icy diamonds, the mountains stood as silent witnesses to the unfolding drama. The beauty of the scene was almost surreal, a stark reminder of nature's indifference to human strife. Yet beneath this serene facade, a storm was brewing. But the serenity was a facade. The air hummed with a silent menace, a premonition of the coming storm. The mountains, with their imposing presence, seemed to hold their breath, waiting for the inevitable clash. The silence was deafening, broken only by the distant rumble of engines, a premonition of the coming storm. For Lieutenant Alberto Martins and his wingman, Second Lieutenant Danilo Moura, the dawn brought no comfort. They were part of the 1st Brazilian Fighter Squadron, tasked with a dangerous mission. As they prepared their P-47 Thunderbolts for flight, the weight of their responsibility pressed heavily on their shoulders. Aboard their P-47 Thunderbolts, the roar of the engines drowned out any thoughts of fear or doubt. The aircraft, with their powerful engines and formidable firepower, were a symbol of hope and defiance. As they soared into the sky, the beauty of the dawn was lost to them. They were hunters, focused on their mission. The beauty of the dawn was lost. They were hunters, their eyes scanning the landscape for any sign of movement. Every shadow, every glint of metal could be a potential target. The tension was palpable, a silent testament to the high stakes of their mission. Their prey, the remnants of the German war machine, scattered and desperate. The once formidable enemy was now a shadow of its former self, clinging desperately to the valleys below. The pilots knew that every successful mission brought them one step closer to victory, but also one step closer to danger. Clinging desperately to the valleys below. The valleys, scarred by the ravages of war, were a stark reminder of the cost of conflict. As the pilots flew over the battle-scarred landscape, they couldn't help but think of the lives lost and the sacrifices made. The dawn over the Alps was a moment of reflection, a brief pause in the relentless march of war. The radio crackled to life, the voice of command sharp and urgent. The static was a constant reminder of the distance and the danger that lay between them and their base. Each word that came through was a lifeline, a thread connecting them to the world they were fighting to protect. Cobra Flight, this is Eagle Nest, target confirmed. The message was clear, but the weight of it settled heavily on the shoulders of every pilot in the formation. They had trained for this moment, but nothing could truly prepare them for the reality of combat. Commence attack, run on your mark. The order was given, and there was no turning back. The pilots knew that their actions in the next few minutes could change the course of the battle, and perhaps the war itself. Each second felt like an eternity as they prepared to dive into the fray. Alberto could feel the tension in his own jaw, mirrored in the set of Danilo's profile beside him. They had flown countless missions together, but this one felt different. The stakes were higher, the risks greater. The bond between them was unspoken, forged in the crucible of war. They were about to plunge into the maw of hell. The sky around them was filled with the roar of engines and the distant thud of anti-aircraft fire. Each pilot knew that survival was not guaranteed, but they pressed on, driven by duty and the hope of victory. "Roger that, Eagle Nest," Alberto responded, his voice steady, betraying nothing of the turmoil within. He had learned to mask his fear, to project confidence even when his heart was pounding in his chest. The lives of his comrades depended on his ability to lead, to stay calm under pressure. "Cobra Flight attacking on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark!" With those words, the formation broke, each plane diving towards its target with precision and determination. The battle had begun, and there was no room for hesitation. Each pilot knew their role, and they executed it with unwavering focus. The roar of the Thunderbolt's engines echoed off the mountainsides as they dived, transformed from graceful birds of prey into bolts of lightning. Below, the ground rushed closer, details sharpening into focus enemy trucks, artillery emplacements, and scrambling soldiers. Ants caught in a sudden downpour. Alberto squeezed the trigger. His guns roared, spitting streams of fire and lead. Explosions blossomed on the ground, each one a small victory in the larger fight for freedom. A jarring thud shook Alberto's aircraft, the world outside momentarily tilting on its axis. He fought for control, adrenaline surging through his veins. Smoke filled the cockpit, acrid and choking. His heart pounded in his ears. Looking back over his shoulder, he saw it. A gaping hole in the left wing, where moments before there had been solid steel. They had flown too close, clipped a chimney rising defiantly from a shattered farmhouse. As if their troubles weren't dire enough, the sky erupted around them. British Spitfires, mistaking the crippled Thunderbolts for enemy aircraft, dove in, cannons blazing. Alberto cursed. Friendly fire was a cruel and capricious mistress. He weaved and bobbed, trying to evade the deadly dance of the Spitfire's tracers. His Thunderbolt, already wounded, groaned under the strain. He needed to land, and quickly. Spotting a field ahead, Alberto wrestled his battered aircraft towards it. Each bump, each groan of the airframe sent shards of fear through him. He whispered a prayer, a promise to his God and his country. With a final, teeth-gritting effort, he slammed the Thunderbolt onto the uneven ground. The plane skidded and bounced, finally coming to a shuddering halt. He was down, but alive. Dornelles too managed a rough landing nearby. They climbed out, shaken, but exhilarated, to survey the damage. The adrenaline still coursed through their veins, a stark contrast to the serene landscape around them. The sky, once a canvas of chaos, now stretched out in a peaceful blue, as if the battle had never happened. The pilots exchanged glances, a silent acknowledgement of the narrow escape they had just experienced. Each scar on their Thunderbolts told a story of bravery, skill, and sheer will to survive. Their Thunderbolts, bearing the scars of battle, stood silent in the afternoon sun. The once mighty machines, now battered and bruised, were a testament to the fierce combat they had endured. The sun cast long shadows, highlighting the dents and bullet holes that marred their surfaces. It was a moment of reflection for the pilots, a time to appreciate the resilience of their aircraft and the skill that had brought them back safely. The air, no longer filled with the scream of engines and the roar of guns, held an eerie quiet. The silence was almost deafening, a stark reminder of the violence that had just transpired. The empty airfield, littered with the remnants of battle, seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next wave of action. It was a brief respite, a calm before the inevitable storm that was sure to come. The mission, though fraught with peril, had been a success. The pilots had managed to complete their objectives and return to base, a feat that was never guaranteed in the chaos of war. Their celebration was subdued, a mix of relief and the sobering reality of the losses they had witnessed. Each successful mission was a small victory, a step closer to the ultimate goal of peace. But the war was far from over. The conflict raged on, with each day bringing new challenges and dangers. The pilots knew that their respite was temporary, a brief pause in the relentless march of war. They prepared for the next mission, their minds focused on the tasks ahead. The battlefield was a constant reminder of the stakes, a place where bravery and sacrifice were the currency of survival. As they waited for rescue, Alberto knew that their dance with death was merely on hold, a pause in the unfinished symphony of conflict. The war had a rhythm of its own, a relentless beat that drove them forward. Each mission was a note in this symphony, a part of a larger composition that none of them could fully understand. They were players in a grand tragic opera, their fates intertwined with the ebb and flow of battle. The waiting was the hardest part, a time of reflection and anticipation. Alberto and his